Virgin forced into a one-night stand with an arrogant billionaire. But after that night, everything changed. The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor, and Nora Hayes stepped out like a woman walking toward something she couldn't take back. She told herself she was calm. She was not calm. Her heart was doing something violent inside her chest, a frantic, ugly rhythm that had nothing to do with the six-block sprint she'd made in heels that didn't belong to her. The shoes were her roommate Dana's. The black dress was Dana's too. Even the small clutch purse pressing a rectangular bruise into her palm. Donna's. Everything about tonight was borrowed, including, Nora was beginning to suspect, her courage. The hallway stretched before her in that particular shade of cream that only existed in places where money had stopped being a concept and become an atmosphere. Soft sconces lined the walls. The carpet swallowed her footsteps whole. Somewhere beneath the hush, a piano piece murmured from a hidden speaker. Chopin, maybe, or something pretending to be Chopin. And Nora thought absurdly that even the music here sounded expensive. Room 4217. She had the number written on the inside of her wrist in blue ink, pressed there by her own hand 40 minutes ago, while sitting on the edge of her bathtub, trying to breathe. She found the door. She stood in front of it for what felt like 3 full minutes, but was probably 11 seconds. "You don't have to do this," she said, the part of her that had read too many novels and still believed in something like dignity. "Mom's surgery is in 6 days, said the part of her that had checked their bank account that morning and watched the number sit there, flat and indifferent, like a door that wouldn't open no matter how hard she knocked. Nora raised her hand, knocked. The man who opened the door was not what she'd imagined. She didn't know exactly what she had imagined. Someone older, maybe, softer around the edges. Someone who looked like he needed something she might be able to provide without it costing her everything she was. Damian Cole was 31 years old and looked like God had been in a particularly ruthless mood the morning he made him. Tall absurdly, when inconveniently tall, with dark hair that sat in that careful disorder that took either tremendous effort or tremendous genetics. His jaw was the kind that portrait painters invented excuses to include. His eyes were gray, and not the gentle gray of a winter morning. The cold gray of slate, of something that didn't move. He was still in his dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a glass of scotch in one hand. He looked at her the way men like him looked at everything, like she was a line item, an appointment, something to be assessed and either approved or dismissed. His gaze traveled over her once, unhurried, clinical. "You're late," he said. Not hello, not come in, not even the faint performance of courtesy. "You're late." Nora felt something flicker in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite humiliation. Something in between, with teeth. 4 minutes, she said, because she had checked, and 4 minutes was not late by any reasonable definition, and she didn't know why she was already defending herself to a man she'd met 7 seconds ago. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, nothing so generous as that. More like mild recalibration, like she had answered in a language he hadn't expected her to speak. He stepped aside. She walked in. The suite was obscene. That was the only word for it. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline, like a painting someone had commissioned from God. The Hudson a dark ribbon below. The lights of New Jersey trembling on the other side. The whole luminous excess of the city laid out as though specifically arranged for this room, this moment, when this man who didn't bother to look at it anymore because he had stopped being impressed by beauty a long time ago. There was a dining table with 2 settings, a bottle of wine opened, roses on the sideboard, white arranged without apology. Nora didn't know why the roses made it worse. She stood in the center of the room and kept her spine very straight, the way her mother had always told her to. Because posture is the one thing nobody can take from you, Nora Bird. And she thought about her mother, and the surgery, and the number in the bank account. And she held all of it together with the precise, exhausting tension of someone who has decided not to cry in front of a stranger. Especially not this stranger. Damien Cole set his scotch down on the bar and turned to look at her again, more deliberately this time. She had the unnerving feeling that he was memorizing things about her, cataloging them, filing them somewhere cold and organized behind those slate eyes. First time? He asked. The question landed without ceremony. Nora blinked. Excuse me? This arrangement. His voice was even, unhurried, like the question cost him nothing. You have the look of someone who's never done this before. She wanted to say something sharp, something that would recalibrate him the way he had recalibrated her. She wanted to fold her arms and lift her chin and tell him that she wasn't readable, that she wasn't transparent, that whatever he thought he saw when he looked at her was a projection and a presumption. Instead, what came out was, "Does it matter?" A pause. Something moved across his face, quick and nearly invisible, like a shadow passing over still water. "No," he said. "I suppose it doesn't." He picked up his scotch again and turned toward the window, and Nora stood in the center of the most expensive room she had ever been in borrowed shoes, with her mother's surgery 6 days away, and her heart doing that violent, ugly thing. And she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, after tonight, nothing will ever be exactly the same. She was right. She just didn't know yet whether that was a tragedy or a beginning. Dearest viewers, have you ever had to make a choice that felt wrong in every way, except the reason behind it? Drop it in the comments. You might not be as alone as you think. Nora Hayes had grown up learning how to make herself small in large spaces. It was a skill developed early, in the cramped Queens apartment where she and her mother shared a bedroom until Nora was 12, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors argue in 2 languages, where her mother worked double shifts at the hospital laundry and came home smelling like industrial bleach and exhaustion. You learned in spaces like that how to fold yourself, how to take up only the room you were absolutely certain you had permission to occupy. She was 23 now, living in a Bushwick apartment with Dana and a radiator that clanged like it had opinions, working 2 jobs, barista by morning, data entry clerk by afternoon, and taking night classes toward a business degree she was beginning to suspect she would be paying off until she was 50. She had never been to a party above the 3rd floor of any building. She had never owned anything designer. She had never, not once, been looked at the way Damien Cole had just looked at her, like she was something to be solved. She had also never been kissed by anyone she was in love with. That particular detail had always felt slightly embarrassing, like a book she kept meaning to read and kept putting down. She thought about that now, standing near the window while Damien refilled his scotch, and felt the particular sting of it. Not shame exactly. More like the awareness of a door she hadn't yet opened, and the horrible suspicion that tonight was not the right door, and she was walking through it anyway.
If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing love stories. All right, back to the story.
"Sit," Damien said, nodding toward the dining table. Not a suggestion. Nora sat. Damien Cole had been told, no, at various points in his life, that he was brilliant, ruthless, visionary, and impossible to love. He had taken the first 3 as compliments and the last one as a fact of nature, the way some regions simply don't get rain. It wasn't something he mourned. Mourning required a belief that things could have been different, and Damien had long since stopped entertaining beliefs that had no supporting data. He was the sole heir to Cole Enterprises, commercial real estate, private equity, a technology subsidiary that had quietly eaten 3 competitors in the last 18 months. His father had built the foundation. Damien had tripled it, then tripled it again, and somewhere in the process had become the kind of man whose name made other men straighten their ties before entering a room. He had learned to use that. Shirun, what he had not learned, what no one had ever successfully taught him, including the therapist his last girlfriend had begged him to see for 8 sessions before she packed her things and left a note that said simply, "You are not capable of this," was how to be in a room with another person without it feeling fundamentally like a negotiation. Tonight was a negotiation, a clean one. His assistant Marcus had arranged it, as Marcus arranged everything, with the quiet efficiency of a man who had stopped judging his employer's decisions 3 years ago and simply executed them. Damien had been in New York for a board meeting. He had not wanted company exactly. He never wanted company, but there was something about the city at night, from this height, that made the silence of a hotel suite feel less like peace and more like punishment. He told Marcus, "Someone quiet, someone who won't try to impress me." He had not expected this. He hadn't expected her. He watched her now from the bar, the way she sat at his dining table with her spine perfectly straight and her hands folded on the tablecloth, fingers laced together with the careful precision of someone trying very hard not to fidget. She had dark hair, pulled back but coming loose at the temples, brown eyes that caught the candlelight and held it, a face that was, and he noted this with the detached observation he applied to most things, quietly remarkable. Not the calculated, constructed beauty he was accustomed to in his world. Something unguarded, something that hadn't yet learned to perform itself. She was nervous, clearly. She was also, just as clearly, refusing to show it. And there was something in that refusal that Damien found unexpectedly. He searched for the word, interesting. That hadn't happened in a while. He carried the wine to the table and poured her a glass without asking. "You don't have to look like you're waiting for sentencing," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Nora looked at him steadily. "I don't know what you'd like me to look like. Normal would be a start. Normal for which one of us?" Another pause. Longer this time. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like the ghost of one, surprised into existence and quickly suppressed. "Fair point," he said. Across town in the Bushwick apartment, Dana Reyes was eating cereal at 11 p.m. and trying not to check her phone every 4 minutes. She was failing at the phone part. Dana was 24. I'm Puerto Rican, magnificently opinionated, and Nora's best friend since their freshman orientation at City College. When they'd both reached for the last free tote bag at the same moment, and Dana had said rock, paper, scissors, no takebacks, and Nora had laughed for the first time in what had felt like weeks. They'd been inseparable since. She knew about the surgery. She knew about the bank account. She knew about tonight because Nora had told her everything. Sitting on the bathroom floor at 9 p.m., still in her regular clothes, voice very flat and eyes very dry in the specific way that meant she was about 10 minutes from falling apart. Dana had not tried to talk her out of it. She had wanted to. God, she had wanted to. But she also knew that when Nora Hayes made a decision, when she had already argued both sides of it inside her own head with a thoroughness that would have impressed a debate coach, and anything Dana said would simply be ground she'd already covered. Instead, Dana had given her the dress, the shoes, the clutch. She had done Nora's eyeliner with the focused attention of someone performing something sacred, and she had said very quietly as Nora walked out the door, "You're still you no matter what happens in that room. Okay? You're still you." Now Dana stared at her cereal and thought about all the ways a person could enter a room, one thing, and leave it another, and hoped, with a fierceness that surprised even her, that Nora came home okay. Back in the suite, the wine was good. Nora knew it was good because it tasted like nothing she'd ever had before. Not sweet, not sharp, just deep somehow. Neat like a color rather than a flavor. She took one sip, then another. Then she set the glass down and made herself stop, because she needed to be present for this, whatever this was. Damien was watching her. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked. "Didn't your assistant—" "I'm asking you." Something about the directness of it, not rude exactly, just absolute, like he'd simply decided that information from intermediaries didn't count, made her answer before she decided to. "Nora," she said. "Nora Hayes." He said nothing for a moment, just looked at her with those slate eyes as though her name were a document he was reading carefully. "Why are you here, Nora Hayes?" The question was quiet, not unkind, but there was something underneath it. Something that felt less like small talk and more like genuine inquiry, which was almost worse. And because she hadn't prepared for that. She'd prepared for cold, for transactional, for a man who didn't bother with why. She considered lying, considered the performance of confidence. Something airy, something that implied this was ordinary for her, something that protected the soft, terrified truth of it. Then she thought about her mother, about the way she'd looked last Tuesday in the hospital consultation room. Smaller than Nora had ever seen her, hands folded in her lap like a child's. Nodding at things the doctor said with the careful blankness of someone who had already done the math and found the answer unacceptable. Nora looked at Damien Cole across the candlelit table in his obscene suite with the city burning behind him, and she said quietly and without decoration, "My mother is sick. The surgery costs more than I have." This was the fastest solution I could find. The silence that followed was the most specific silence Nora had ever sat inside. Damien's expression didn't change. Not exactly, but something shifted beneath it. Some small internal adjustment, quick and private, like a compass needle finding north. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his wine glass, leaned back in his chair, and said nothing. And somehow the nothing felt like the beginning of something. Dearest viewers, she walked into that room for her mother. Would you have done the same? Tell us in the comments. The night did not go the way either of them planned. That was the thing. Nobody told you about moments you spent weeks dreading. They rarely arrived in the shape you'd built for them inside your head. You constructed the architecture of your fear so carefully, it reinforced every wall, mapped every exit, and then the actual moment walked in through a door you hadn't even noticed and sat down without asking. Nora had expected, she didn't know exactly, something cold, something that would require her to be somewhere else inside herself while her body remained in the room. She had prepared for that, had built a small, quiet interior space she could retreat to, furnished with memories of her mother's laugh and the smell of Sunday morning coffee and the particular quality of Brooklyn light in October. She had not prepared for conversation. She had not prepared for him to ask her name like it mattered. And she had absolutely not prepared for what happened at 11:47 p.m. when her phone rang. She had put it on silent. She had been responsible about that, tucked it into Dana's clutch with the screen down, a small act of commitment to the decision she'd already made. But the clutch was on the side table near the door, and even on silent, a phone vibrating against a lacquered surface in a quiet room makes a sound like an accusation. Nora glanced at it involuntarily. Damien noticed. He noticed everything. She was already understanding that about him, the way his attention moved, total and unblinking, like a surveillance system that never powered down. "Take it," he said. "It's fine. Take it, Nora." There it was again, her name in his mouth. He said it like a period at the end of a sentence. Final, unambiguous, leaving no room for negotiation. She was beginning to understand that this was simply how he spoke, not cruelty, so just the complete absence of hedging. She crossed to the clutch and looked at the screen. Queen's General Hospital. Nurses Station 4B. The floor dropped out of her stomach. She answered before she'd consciously decided to, already turning away from him, already pressing the phone to her ear with both hands like she could hold whatever was coming at a distance. Ms. Hayes? A woman's voice, calm and professional, which somehow made it worse. This is Nurse Callahan from Queen's General. I'm calling about your mother, Patricia Hayes. She had a small episode this evening. Her blood pressure spiked during routine monitoring. She's stable now. I want to make that clear first. I'm coming, Nora said. Ms. Hayes, she's stable. There's no need to. I'm coming. She hung up, turned around. You reached for the clutch with fingers that were not entirely steady, and that was when she made the mistake of looking at Damian Cole. He was standing now. She didn't know when he'd stood up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't catalog, not the cool assessment from before, not the almost amusement at the dinner table. Something quieter, something that didn't have a name yet. My mother, Nora said, because she owed him some explanation, because she was still, even now, her mother's daughter, and her mother had raised her to be decent. The hospital called. I have to go. I'm sorry. I know this isn't. I'm sorry. She was moving toward the door when his voice stopped her. I'll drive you. She turned, stared at him. I have a car, he said, as though this were simply logistical information and not a complete non sequitur from a man who 20 minutes ago had looked at her like a line item. You don't have to. I'm aware. He was already reaching for his jacket. Charcoal, expensive, draped over the back of the armchair. My driver is faster than a cab at this hour. Queen's General? She blinked. How did you... You said Queen's General to whoever called. He said it without looking at her, shrugging on the jacket with the ease of a man who had never once in his life fumbled anything. Are we going or not? Nora stood in the doorway of the most expensive room she'd ever been in borrowed shoes, heart hammering, and looked at Damian Cole. This cold, controlled, arrogant man who owed her absolutely nothing and was standing there with his car keys implied and his jacket on. Waiting. She could not, for the life of her, make sense of him. We're going, she said. The car was black, long, and silent in the way that only truly expensive things manage. Not the absence of sound, but the absorption of it, like the vehicle had been engineered to consume the city's chaos and convert it into stillness. Nora sat rigid in the back seat, clutch in her lap, watching the Manhattan streets blur past the window. The Brooklyn Bridge approached and receded. The BQE opened up ahead of them, the city skyline shrinking in the side mirror like something beautiful and indifferent. Damian sat beside her, not close. There was appropriate distance between them, a foot of leather seat at least. But in the silence of the car, that foot felt like both too much and not enough. And Nora was acutely, uncomfortably aware of him in the way you became aware of a heat source in a cold room. You didn't look directly at it. You just felt it. She's stable, he said. Not a question. Not comfort exactly. More like a fact he was offering, the way you'd hand someone something they dropped. She has a heart condition, Nora said, and she didn't know why she was telling him this, except that the silence had weight and words were lighter. Has had it for 6 years. The surgery is to repair a valve. The doctors say they say it's very successful when it's done early, which is why we need to do it now, while she's still... She stopped, pressed her lips together, while she's still strong enough. While the window is open, Damian said nothing, but he was listening. She could feel it. The quality of his silence was different when he was listening versus when he was simply being somewhere. She was already learning to tell the difference, which was a strange thing to be learning about a man she had known for less than 2 hours. How much, or he said. She turned to look at him. What? The surgery? How much? Something cold moved through her. She turned back to the window. That's not why I told you. I know. His voice was even. How much? Damien. His name came out before she decided to use it, and it felt strange in her mouth, familiar in a way it had no right to be yet. She saw something flicker across his face. Quick, private. I'm not asking you for anything. I told you why I was there tonight. That's all. The silence stretched. 80,000, she said finally, because apparently she was incapable of being dishonest, even when dishonesty would have served her. 83 with the pre-op costs. Damien looked out his own window. His jaw was set. She watched his reflection in the glass and tried to read it, and couldn't. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Queen's General at midnight had the specific energy of all hospitals at midnight. Fluorescent and hushed, and slightly outside of time. The kind of place where the normal rules of day and night didn't quite apply. Nora moved through the lobby with the practiced speed of someone who had made this walk before, too many times, and Damien followed her without being asked and without drawing attention to the fact that he was following, which somehow made it easier. Patricia Hayes was in room 4B, propped against pillows, the blood pressure monitor beeping its steady reassurance. She was 61 and looked younger than that, fine-boned and bright-eyed, with Nora's same dark hair gone silver at the temples and a quality of attention in her face that made you feel when she looked at you, that you were the most interesting person in the room. She looked at Nora first, then at the man standing in the doorway behind Nora, in a charcoal jacket that probably cost more than a month of hospital room fees. Her eyebrows rose approximately 1 centimeter. Baby, she said, reaching for Nora's hand. I told the nurse not to call you. I told her specifically. I know what you told her, Nora said, sitting on the edge of the bed and squeezing her mother's hand with both of hers. I'm here anyway. Patricia's gaze moved, and with the unstoppable gravitational pull of maternal curiosity, back to the doorway. And who, she said pleasantly, is this? Nora turned. She had, in the controlled emergency of the last 40 minutes, almost forgotten that he was a stranger. That was an alarming thing to realize. This is, she started. Damien, he said, stepping forward. And then, with a smoothness that astonished her, he extended his hand to Patricia Hayes and said, I'm a friend of Nora's. I drove her over. I wanted to make sure she got here safely. Patricia shook his hand, looked at him with those bright, measuring eyes, then looked at Nora. Nora gave her absolutely nothing. She had nothing to give. Well, Patricia said, settling back against her pillows with the satisfaction of a woman filing information away for later. That was very kind of you. Damien. It was nothing, he said. But he stayed. He sat in the vinyl chair by the window, this billionaire in his charcoal jacket, in a Queen's hospital room at midnight. And he was quiet and unobtrusive and present in a way that Nora could not explain and could not stop noticing. And when Patricia finally drifted to sleep around 1 a.m., Nora looked across the room at him and found him already looking at her. Neither of them said anything, but something had shifted between them, something that had not been there 2 hours ago and could not now be unfiled, could not be returned to the clean, transactional arrangement that Marcus had scheduled, and neither of them had actually managed to execute. They had not spent the night the way it was planned. They had spent it here, in this small room, and on either side of a sleeping woman, and somehow that was more intimate than anything either of them had prepared for. Nora looked away first. Outside the window, Queens hummed its nighttime hum, indifferent and faithful, and the city that never slept kept its promise. 3 weeks later, Nora was still trying to forget him. She was failing spectacularly. It wasn't as though she hadn't tried. She had, in fact, applied to the project of forgetting Damien Cole, the same focused determination she applied to everything. Her coursework, her 2 jobs, the careful management of her mother's medication schedule typed into a color-coded spreadsheet on her phone. She was good at focus. She was good at deciding what mattered and directing her energy there like a beam, clean and purposeful. The problem was that forgetting a person required, was a foundational step, the ability to stop thinking about them. And Nora's brain apparently had not received that memo. She thought about him at the coffee bar, foaming milk for a customer's latte, watching the steam rise and remembering the way the city had looked from his window, that obscene, luminous spread of it, all that light going nowhere in particular and everywhere at once. She thought about him in her data entry job, fingers moving automatically across the keyboard, mind drifting to the hospital room, to the specific quality of his stillness in that vinyl chair, the way he had occupied that small, ordinary space without diminishing it or being diminished by it, which should not have been possible for a man like him, but was. She thought about him in her night class. I'm staring at a case study about corporate acquisitions with a sudden, vertiginous awareness that she knew what a Cole Enterprises acquisition looked like from the inside of a very expensive hotel suite, which was information her professor had definitely not planned to convey. She was not, she told herself firmly, thinking about the way he'd said her name. She was absolutely thinking about the way he'd said her name. The flowers arrived on a Tuesday, not roses. She registered that immediately, with a relief that embarrassed her, because roses would have been obvious. Transactional. The kind of thing a man like him sent when he was simply completing a gesture. These were ranunculus, pale yellow and cream, in a simple glass vase with no elaborate wrapping, no dramatic presentation. Just flowers. Arriving at the Bushwick apartment via a courier who handed them to Dana with the blank efficiency of someone who delivered things for a living and had stopped wondering about their contents. There was a card. Dana held it out to Nora with both hands and the expression of someone presenting evidence in a trial. Nora took it. The surgery is covered. Don't argue with me about this. She read it 3 times. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor, which was not a thing she had planned to do, and Dana sat down next to her without being asked, because that was the kind of friend Dana was, and they both looked at the card in silence for a moment. He paid for it, Nora said. I can read, Dana said. He paid for it. $83,000. Dana, I'm not saying anything. You're thinking very loudly. I'm thinking, Donna said carefully, that a man who pays $83,000 for a stranger's mother's heart surgery and signs the card with only his initial is either the most arrogant person alive or the most... She stopped. The most what? Donna looked at the flowers. I'm not finishing that sentence because you'll overthink it for 6 weeks. Nora overthought it for 6 weeks, starting immediately. She called the number on the card, a cell number, not an office line, which she cataloged without meaning to, and he answered on the second ring. I told you not to argue, he said by way of greeting. I'm not arguing, Nora said. I need to thank you, and I need to know why. A pause. She heard something in the background, the ambient murmur of what sounded like a very quiet, very expensive room. Your mother needed the surgery, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She stood in her kitchen with the ranunculus on the counter and the card in her hand, and something complicated moving around in her chest, and she said, I'll pay you back, every cent. It'll take me, Nora, probably 4 years at my current. Nora. The way he said it stopped her. Not sharp, not commanding. Just her name in that particular way he had, like it was the only word in the sentence that mattered. Have dinner with me, he said. The silence that followed was approximately the length of Nora's entire internal debate, which was longer than she would have liked. Why? She said finally. Because I'd like to. Another pause, quieter. That's also the only answer I have. She should have said no. There were 17 sensible reasons to say no, and she was aware of most of them, and she said, okay. He was in New York for the month. Something about a development project in Hudson Yards. Meetings that apparently required his physical presence rather than simply his authority, which Nora gathered was unusual enough that his assistant Marcus had mentioned it twice during the logistics of the dinner arrangement, with the slightly baffled tone of a man recalibrating his understanding of his employer. They met at a restaurant in the West Village, not the kind of place Nora expected, which would have been somewhere glacially formal with menus in French and waiters who looked at your shoes. This was smaller, warmer, wood-paneled walls and candlelight, and a wine list that was serious without being theatrical about it. She wore her own dress this time, navy blue, simple, with small buttons down the front that she'd bought 2 years ago for a job interview and had worn exactly twice since. Her own shoes, low block heels, dark brown, her own everything. She had decided this mattered, though she couldn't have fully articulated why. He was already there when she arrived, standing near the host stand, not sitting. She registered that. He had not simply claimed the table and waited. He had stood near the entrance, and when she walked in, he looked at her with an expression she was learning to watch for. That quick, private recalibration, there and gone in under a second, like a shutter. "You're on time," he said. "I usually am," she said. Something that was almost a smile. "I know." They were seated at a corner table, slightly apart from the other diners, and Nora understood without being told that this had been arranged deliberately, the way everything around Damien Cole was arranged deliberately, and she couldn't decide if it felt like consideration or control. Possibly both. "Tell me something true," he said once the wine was poured. She looked up from the menu. "What?" "Something true about yourself." He said it with the same directness he applied to everything. No preamble, no social scaffolding. "Not the resume version. Something real." Nora looked at him for a moment. Then she set the menu down. "I've never left New York," she said. "Not once. I've lived here my whole life, and I've never been on a plane. I've never seen the ocean from anywhere except the shore." She paused. "I think about it sometimes. What it would feel like to be somewhere completely different. Somewhere nobody knows what I'm supposed to be." He was quiet for a moment. "Where would you go?" he asked. And the question was, she noticed this, not rhetorical. He actually wanted to know. "Somewhere with different light," she said. "The light in New York it's beautiful, but it's always in a hurry. I want to be somewhere where the light just stays." He looked at her across the candlelit table and said nothing for a beat too long. "Tuscany," he said then quietly. "The light stays in Tuscany." "You've been?" "Several times." A pause. Something shifted in his face. Something that was not the controlled assessment she'd come to expect, but something older, less managed. My mother took me when I was 9. Before he stopped, picked up his wine glass. "Before things changed." Nora did not push. She understood instinctively that this was the edge of something, a door slightly ajar, light coming through the crack, and that pushing would close it. "It sounds beautiful," she said simply. He looked at her. "It is." The dinner lasted 3 hours. She learned that he took his coffee black, that he had read Anna Karenina 4 times, and believed Levin was the only honest character in it, that he had a younger sister named Claire who lived in London and called him every Sunday, whether he answered or not, that he had not taken a vacation in 2 years, and that he had started the Hudson Yards project against the advice of 3 board members and 2 financial analysts, and was quietly certain he was right. And he learned that she took her coffee with too much sugar, that she had memorized the entire script of Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 film, not the BBC series, a distinction she made firmly, that she had a spider plant named Gerald, who was thriving despite her best efforts to neglect him, that she had wanted to study literature but had chosen business because it seemed more survivable, and that she had never, not once, told her mother exactly how frightened she was. That last one came out quietly toward the end of the third hour when the restaurant had thinned and the candles had burned lower and Nora was slightly warmer from the wine than she'd intended to be. She thinks I'm handling it, Nora said, looking at the candle flame. She thinks I'm capable and fine and not scared. I let her think that because it's better for her recovery. But I'm... She stopped. Terrified, Damien said. She looked at him. Yes, she said. He held her gaze, not with the cool assessment from before, with something steadier, something that felt like being held in place, but gently, without pressure. That's not weakness, he said. Carrying fear quietly for someone else's sake. That's... He seemed to search for the word. That's an extraordinary thing, actually. Nora looked at him across the ruins of their dinner. The empty glasses, the breadbasket, the candles nearly gone, and felt something loosen in her chest. Some small, tight thing she had been holding for a very long time. She looked away before he could see it on her face, but not quite fast enough. Outside the restaurant, he walked her to the corner where her subway entrance was. Ewan and they stood on the West Village sidewalk in the October air with the city moving around them and a foot of space between them. That same foot from the car, that recurring, charged, impossible foot. And Nora thought, don't, and then thought, don't what exactly? Thank you, she said, for dinner. Thank you for the truth, he said. She smiled, a real one, small and involuntary, gone almost before it arrived, and turned toward the subway stairs. Nora, she turned back. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, unguarded almost, like something had gotten through the surveillance system without being detected, and he was only now becoming aware of it. He opened his mouth, closed it. Something moved across his face. Indecision, which she suspected was very rare for him. The light, he said finally. Yes, in Tuscany. A beat. I'll take you someday. It was not a question. It was not quite a promise. It was something in between, softer than his usual declarations, more uncertain, like a man feeling the ground ahead of him before committing his weight. Nora looked at him for one long moment. Okay, she said softly, and went down the stairs before either of them could say anything that couldn't be taken back. She was 2 blocks from her apartment, walking fast in the October dark, when she realized she was smiling. She pressed her hand over her mouth, stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. A man walking a golden retriever gave her a curious look. Sorry, she said to no one in particular, and kept walking. Dearest viewers, what happens next? Hit the subscribe button and stay tuned as we bring you the part 2 of this very interesting story.